From the WACH Fox studios, this is On Point on WACH Fox with Cynthia Hardy.
Good morning. Welcome to On Point on WACH Fox. It's a pleasure always to bring you our show. We also like to invite you to tune in to the radio show On Point with Cynthia Hardy, heard every Sunday evening, 6 p.m. on 101.3 The Big DM. Today on Point on WACH, we're talking stereotypes, the facts, and people on public assistance. How often have you heard that most people on public assistance are single women who abuse the system? Advocates for the poor say that stereotype is why a host of states are looking at drug testing recipients, limiting the kind of food people on assistance can buy with food stamps, and further restricting where the state-provided dollars can be spent. In South Carolina, the maximum welfare a family of four can receive is about $270 a month, while the average family payment is less than $170. To qualify, recipients must fall below 50% of the federal poverty level. That means a mom with 2 children, for example, must make less than $763 a month. That's not a lot. So where do these stereotypes come from? Why do so many people think folks on public assistance are abusing the system? I'm seated today with Brian McConkey, and I always like to tell people what a great anchor you are here at WACH Fox and how wonderfully glad we are.
To me, as always, every week.
We're just excited to have you on the show every week because you bring a great perspective. And today when we talk about stereotypes, the facts, and people on public assistance, I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are on the issue.
Well, of course, I think we all know that this is nothing new. I mean, these type of images we have of certain people who are on assistance have existed for decades, and the argument had always been the same too. And you hit on a couple of those points in the open, that they're having kids so they can get more money. They're doing this so they don't have to work. They're just lazy.
Right.
And maybe there are some people that fit those stereotypes, but there's a fair amount that probably are, especially in this economy. And maybe that's why more and more people are talking about it right now, because there are more and more people out of work. There are more and more people facing very dire situations.
Very dire situations, and I think it's important that we are able to have the conversations, and we thought we'd bring experts to talk about it. Linda Martin's Deputy Director over at South Carolina Department of Social Services. We thank you for being here, as we thank Joe Sawyer, who is a Republican strategist. And let's just go ahead and start with the stereotypes. You hear so often that people on public assistance sit around, Linda, they sit around, they watch soap operas all day. Many people have this perspective that they sit around, they do drugs all day and things like that, and just really abuse the system when folks like us, hardworking folks, are out there taking care of these deadbeats. But you say not the case.
Not the case, especially not the case in South Carolina. Folks on public assistance in South Carolina, if they're able-bodied, are required to work 30 hours a week or be involved in a training system for work in order to continue to get their assistance check. So nobody's really sitting home doing nothing in South Carolina.
We hear that, and we did a radio show recently on the same issue, and Linda Martin was gracious enough to come, but we got a number of calls from people who were very concerned about what they see people with in the grocery store, Joel. People often say, I see people with a lot of children, and I look in the buggy and I don't see nutritious foods.
Right.
Isn't there something we can do to require that people buy nutritious foods? You say what to that?
I say absolutely. I mean, look, if you're receiving assistance from taxpayers, from the government, I think it's only fair that there be some kind of strings attached, because if you look at the statistics, if people are receiving one type of government assistance, it is likely statistically that they are receiving more types of government assistance. If, for example, that they might also be receiving Medicaid, which is fine. There's a social safety net that's there for a reason. But if my tax dollars or anyone's tax dollars are going to pay for Medicaid or any of these things, let's look at the facts that fatty foods, non-nutritious foods, lead to a host of other problems that contribute to heart disease, things related to obesity, etc. And so, why are we not doing something on the front end to make sure that people are living a little bit more healthily?
When you hear him say that, is there a way to actually do that, to attach those strings and make requirements of people who are on this type of assistance?
And is it unfair of us to think that we should impose something like that on someone because they're poor?
Well, I'm not entirely sure that I can be the arbiter of fair, but I will say that there are already restrictions excuse me, on what people can buy with their food stamps. They have to buy food, they can't buy alcohol, tobacco, they can't buy soap to take a bath with, or shampoo to wash their hair with. They can't buy toilet paper. They can't buy a host of things that they might need, especially if they have children. But in order to restrict what people can buy even more, you really kind of step into some tricky areas. For instance, if you want to regulate sugar content, you might want to say, well, you can't buy cookies, you can't buy candy. What about a box of cake mix for a 4-year-old's birthday? Can you buy that or not? How are you going to actually look individually at the countless number of foods that are available in our grocery stores and decide which ones are nutritious for which people at which time? And how are you going to generate a system that can, item by item, do what's necessary to determine whether this is an item that we want people to buy or not?
I'm wondering, guys, and did you have a response?
Yeah,
right
I
there?
mean, look, we already have that system. I mean, you named off a number of things that already you can't buy. And so, I would throw the question back on you. Why do we accept that we tell people that they can't buy alcohol with a food stamp, but it's wrong to say you can't buy something with, a certain saturated fat content?
I'm wondering if we have taken into account kind of the humane argument here, because on some level we are asking a division or department to legislate or to police things about people that are not policed in the general population.
But the general population isn't receiving a government benefit. I mean, let's be real here. People are getting something for free. And there's nothing wrong with that. Look, as a Republican, as an American, I am in favor of a social safety net system, right? But we need to talk about what is the goal of this thing versus it just being an entitlement that just people are entitled to. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's a different set of rules if I am earning my own money and making my own choices versus that money being given to me. Again, there's nothing wrong with the assistance, but let's tie some strings to it.
Do you have a quick comment before we go to break?
I was just going to
Glenda?
say that the majority of people who are on food stamps are children under the age of 18, and there's already a stigma attached to poverty in this country. So if you have a group of people who can't have a certain kind of cereal, who can't ever have cookies, who can't try the new chips, it tends to stigmatize people more than being poor already does, and can make it more difficult for them to do what we absolutely 100% want them to do, which is get a job and get off assistance, be able to support their families. So
We're going to go to break. When we come back, Brian, I think it'd really be good for us to continue the conversation with Linda
Where we
Martin and
left
Joel
off, I
Sawyer,
think, yeah.
and also talk about these new individuals that are coming onto the system. They look a lot different than what we used to think people on public assistance look like. You guys stay tuned.
You're watching On Point on WACH Fox with Cynthia Hardy on Columbia's own WACH Fox.
Welcome back to On Point on WACH Fox. Brian McConkie and I are leading a conversation about the stereotypes, the facts, and people on public assistance.
And right before we went to break, we talked a little bit about the fact that the face of this situation is changing a bit. And we hear this a lot. You hear it at food banks a lot, too, that they talk about people who used to contribute to certain charities are now the ones that are receiving. And if we want to address what is happening right now, we're talking about people who very well-to-do that are now turning to you for a helping hand, yes?
Right. Beginning with the recession, and really in 2008, we saw the numbers of people on our food stamp rolls and on our welfare rolls dramatically increase. And the difference between the people who were coming on now versus some of the folks we'd had in the past was that the folks we're seeing now really weren't typically in poverty for any long period of time. They'd been folks, many of whom who had good jobs and were living a middle-class life, who when that job went away and there was nothing else available, sometimes nothing else available, but in most instances nothing available that could sustain the lifestyle they had before, then they had nowhere else to turn once unemployment ran out, and they're coming into our agency. And we are doing everything we can to help those people make a quick turnaround and get back to work. One of the things that every person that's on assistance has is a child under the age of 18, and most of them are children who are very young. So daycare becomes essential in order for moms to be able to go to work. And it's sort of like the chicken and the egg, which comes first. You have to have the daycare before you can leave, but if you don't have a job, you really don't have the money to pay for daycare. So what we've done is concentrate in the last 10 months on really seeing what we could do to turn this thing around. And we're extremely proud to say that we've put almost 12,000 of our recipients in jobs, earning enough to be able to close their welfare case, simply by providing the basic supports that they needed, like child care and some help with transportation, and giving them the boost and the encouragement that they needed to go out and get another job. We're extremely proud of that.
Those are success stories, Joel. You agree?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
absolutely a success. Look, I mean, that's what you want at the end of the day, and
Sure.
you want, you want a system that transitions people from, from getting a government benefit into, into being a taxpayer, being, going and having a job. I mean, I think that's absolutely what you want, and I think that is what, well, I think one of the problems or one of the issues with this is that is that we're looking at social assistance in a very compartmentalized way. It's you're just looking at food stamps, or you're just looking
Welfare
at TANF,
benefit.
welfare, or you're just looking at public housing, or you're just looking at Medicaid. And I think that as a government and as a society, we need to look at it in a much broader fashion and talk about providing opportunity for people.
Because I think there is a misconception out there that you can stay on these programs forever, and that is not the case. There's a time limit on this, right?
Absolutely not true. 24 months in South Carolina to be on assistance. 24 months out of 10 years. So 2 years out of 10. If you're on for 2 years, you got to wait 8 years before you can come back on again. So we feel a sense of urgency at the department that we've got to move these people quickly into employment so that they don't reach the end of their time limit with no job and no ability to have the child care and the other resources they need provided to them.
In the minute that we have left, I'd like to hear from each of you what you'd like to see the social services system look like, say in 10 years from now. And in your case, Linda, you're steadily moving people off, but I understand it's a fluid process. As more people go off, more people come on.
Always more people coming on. If you ask me one thing that I wish we could do within the next 10 years, it's to be able to provide child care for everybody who needs it to go to work. I think we'd have fewer people even coming on assistance in the first place if we could say, okay, if your income's under this amount, we'll pay for your child care if you're working. So we would know that folks would be at work. We would know that the child care would eventually age out. Eventually children age out and don't need child care anymore. So it's a time limited assistance, and if we provide good child care, we help children get a better start in school. So focusing on child care would be what I would most like to see us do.
Certainly. And you, Mr. Sawyer?
What I would look at is just a much broader perspective about sustainability, and just making sure that, I think that the first question we have to ask as a government, as a society, is, okay, what kind of assistance can we afford to provide with the resources that are in the system, so that we don't create a much bigger problem for everyone in this country by spending ourselves into debt. TANF, food stamps, those sorts of things are in a broad sense, are relatively cheap programs from a federal standpoint. Some like Medicaid and what we're paying out in Social Security right now, it's really frightening if you look at the future obligations.
I tell you what, you guys, I would hate to think of anybody living on a system and taking advantage of a system, but I sure am happy that we live in a country that is kind enough to have some programs in place when and if people need them most. We thank you both, Linda Martin and Joel Sawyer, for joining us this morning on OnPoint on Watch. And when we come back, we're going to have a discussion with two individuals who have personal experience with this issue. One works in Project Hope that puts people to work, and the other is someone who's written a book about it, Confessions of a Single Mom. You guys stay with us.
You're watching On Point on WACH Fox with Cynthia Hardy on Columbia's own WACH Fox.
Welcome back to On Point on WACH Fox. Stereotypes, the facts, and people on public assistance. That's the topic that we've got.
And we've had a good discussion over the last 10, 12 minutes or so far, kind of hashing out fact versus fiction and how these programs work. And now we're going to get some firsthand, I guess, accounts, you could say, of people that work in this and have lived through it. Kwan Fitch is here, and Stephen Langer as well, that know a little bit about something about this. You've written a book about this called Confessions of a Welfare Mom. And you have some stories to tell, no doubt.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I say, I'm just the maestro of the orchestra. I didn't write the book. The ladies who are on the cover of the book, they actually submitted their personal stories. It's their account. I do very little editing. I talk with them. We have extensive interviews, and then they start writing. And I tell you, when I opened it up, and I started it actually as a CWEP program, a community work experience program, and I just wanted to know, why are you here? What are you doing?
What did you find?
I found a variety of reasons. One being lack of education, lack of support, lack of I call it that stick-to-itiveness. We start a lot of things. We thought we wanted to do cosmetology, then we wanted to do culinary arts, and then we kind of flipped around to a variety of different things. And then one baby, two baby, incarcerated dads, that kind of thing was really, really the base of why people kind of turned to assistance, public assistance. And moving forward, they got with us and they learned that our program was really not about them coming into our community work and learning how to help us, but really us helping them help themselves.
As a job developer, Stephen, you know the women that Kawan is talking about. You know the women that she's talking about, but you're also, you know them from a different perspective. You're a job developer. And when you go out into the community and you say to an employer, I have this woman that I want you to hire. She's got 3 children, but she's completed my jobs program and I know that she's ready to work. What kind of receptivity do you get?
Actually, it's been very good, very positive, because our program is one that provides the kind of training they're looking for. It's not just a stopgap training program. We start from the basics in a boot camp type program whereby we're providing training to these individuals in a way that really does make a difference. It's a 4-week intensive boot camp as we begin our program in Project Hope. There they're learning a number of things. They're learning study skills, they're learning work readiness kinds of things. They're learning how to be ready for work.
So do they actually get a job, keep a job, and get off welfare?
Many do,
Really?
many do. And that's the very encouraging thing. That the fact of the matter is that what our program does is life-changing, because this helps them to really get the big picture of work and of course the details. They know what the job entails before they ever get there. They are trained by the technical college system, so it's a first-rate educational institution that's not only giving them the training but also supports it as well.
So they're getting training for specific to a particular trade or
Absolutely,
job, yes.
Brian. They're getting trained to a very specific one, whether it's CNA, EKG, phlebotomy, others as well. So indeed, they're learning what needs to be done, and on day one, they're ready to do it.
That's where the growth is, too, in the healthcare field.
Absolutely.
Because we're living longer, thank goodness for that.
And we boomers are aging out.
That's right. And so as a matter of fact, it is great to know that you're filling a void that's actually in the marketplace. And are you finding the individuals that are currently on public assistance are skills ready, let's say aptitude ready?
They become that way. They become that way. They may not know they are ready when they first get there, but by the time they finish, they are ready. Absolutely.
I know you see both sides of this, Ms. Fitch, as you have put your book together, and you're very modest to say you didn't write it, but to interview all of those women and to string all of their stories together in a consecutive order, as you have done in your book, and to show all of those faces. Oftentimes, people don't think about people who have fallen from grace.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of people like that.
That was my surprise.
Tell me about a story of someone who's fallen from grace.
I have, I've met several, and when I opened it up online actually, and that's where I got more women who were really willing to share their experience with, like myself, worked for many, many, many years, and how I came actually even into social work was from a social worker saying to me, well, you're going to have to do something else in order to, make up for your going to college part-time. And okay, I found something, and it ended up being my lifelong work. So it was actually my first job in a group home. And I went there as a non-paid employee and just to do my welfare work, and I used it as a co-op the next semester, got some credits for it. But it was a way to move forward. And I have lots of women who, the recession hit, they're no longer able to support themselves under the 5-figure salaries, and they come back and they use food stamps and they use Medicaid. And I also had a lot of women who were not willing to share because they are married and their husbands did not want them to share that they are receiving Medicaid, the family is receiving Medicaid. But then I've had people in my class that I teach at DSS now where I did have a young couple. Both of them are out of work. And they together they are on the benefits, and they together are in class trying to keep their family together, as well as work with the system to do better. So it's a variety of different things.
We're going to hear more. We're going to go to break now, but we're going to hear a lot more from these two coming up here in just a few minutes. So
You guys
we'll
stay
continue that
tuned.
discussion.
You're watching On Point on WACH Fox with Cynthia Hardy on Columbia's own WACH Fox.
Welcome back to On Point on Watch Fox. Brian McConkey and I are having a great conversation with Ms. Fitch and also with Stephen from, he's a jobs developer at DSS with Project Hope, about ways that we can look at the population of individuals who receive public assistance and see the positive. And
also get them away from that way of life and give them some skills. And we talked about that, the program that you're involved with in the last segment. We talked a lot about what you do and how you get people to get ready to get back into the workforce. But what we didn't talk about was who can get involved. What are the qualifications? What are some of the things that may be a strike against you, and where do you go?
Great question. Yeah. The qualifications to get into Project Hope include those where one has to be either a high school graduate or a GED minimum with at least a 2.0 GPA and a clean background. Along with that, they have to be either aging out of the foster care system, or they are low-income high school health science completers, or they are individuals who they themselves or they live in families who are recipients of either TANF or SNAP. Now, along with that, that doesn't guarantee acceptance, because then they have to complete a multi-step process of application. Along with their application, 3 recommendations are provided using our evaluation form. So it's very much of an equalized evaluative process. Those can come from clergy, case managers, people they've worked for in the past, anyone but family or friends. Along with that, we require transcripts to show that completion of at least the high school diploma or the GED minimum with the 2.0 GPA. But the other piece that we require for application is an essay of up to 500 words. That tells you a lot about a person. Tells you how they put their thoughts together and really what their story is. Now, once we have all of that, we invite the candidate in. And at that point, we're doing TABE testing for basic skills as well as work keys. They have to have at least a bronze score in work keys as well. We also drug test and do criminal background checks, so they're doubly clean. Along with all that, once all that is cleared and they fit that mode, then they're accepted into the program.
Wow. Awesome. Let me ask you guys this. You heard us talk in the previous segments about the stereotypes and the fact that a number of people have a different viewpoint of people on public assistance than the one that you're describing right now. You say what to that?
I say get to know the person individually. I think you'll see a real difference there. You know, we're all one paycheck away from homelessness anyway. And I think people need to realize in this economic times that we're all in the same boat. We all need to work together and pull each other up.
Absolutely. You know, as a person who is very educated and someone who is reaching back to assist the population itself, you shared with me that you're right there on the tip of needing the same kind of assistance. And you don't mind sharing that, because oftentimes the face that we put on public assistance is not someone educated and smart and capable of taking care of themselves, when quite to the contrary, there are a number of people just like you that are out there, just like us that are out there.
And you know what, we need to talk about it more, and that was also the point of the book, was that we can share. You know, there's such a stigma even for young people who are receiving assistance and older people who are back on assistance. But if we say, you know what, I said to my ladies, I can't teach you to do something that I won't do for myself. So if I'm not willing to come and share that this is who I am, this is where I'm at, this is the poorest I've ever been in my life, but it's almost about the happiest.
Tell me about that. What do you mean?
Well, you know, I moved here to South Carolina. It was an awesome family decision. You know, my children are thriving. They're doing very, very well. I have a teenage boy, and any single parent knows that when you have teenage boys, you know, to get them a graduate from high school, you know, and no babies and a valid driver's license and in college is a huge, huge feat. And I'm so proud, and being here and connecting with women and just being able to show them that you can do this. You can do this. There are systems in place that can help you. But you know, even with the book, it really was not about me. It was about the women sharing their stories. And this is also, the system was that they can sell the book and make money off of it themselves. So I'm not the only one selling it. There are women out there.
I saw your little business model online. That's another show. Stephen, go ahead. You have a comment.
I was just going to say, you know, you were talking about the face of the individual. I want to share with you this too. And so I mentioned you have to be at least 17 years of age to get into our program. But we have individuals who've applied to our program who are actually working on their master's degree.
Wow.
So, and you know, and I think that's indicative of the time we're living as much as anything else, to see the range from GED to masters of people who are getting into our program.
Sure.
And so that really does show the face of the range of individuals who indeed are the fit for our program.
Well, Stephen Langer and Kawan Fitch, thank you so much, each of you, for joining us today
Thank
and
you.
rounding
So much
out
for
our
having
discussion. You know, Brian, our state didn't enact a bill, but there was one that was introduced that would have
Required drug testing for unemployment benefits.
Right,
for
but there are a
call.
lot of states
Yes.
that are doing it. So I think what we want to say to our audience and to our guests today, that we'll keep our eye on
Sure,
this and pay
absolutely will.
attention to it, because a number of states are going in that direction for many of the reasons that we discussed here today.
And I think we rounded out the discussion very well. We talked about the facts, the fiction against, and some hope as well.
And some hope.
Some hope. What we
Lots
can
of
do to help
Lots of
people
that.
move along.
Well,
So,
that's it for this
Yep.
edition of On Point on Watch Fox. We do want to ask you to send your comments and suggestions to onpointwithcynthia.com. Go to our Facebook page and leave your comments there. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Talk. Like us on Facebook as well at On Point with Cynthia Hardy. Thanks for watching. We believe when you're informed, you're empowered. Once empowered, you are on point. We're going to see you next week.